Hi guys.
Hello.
What's up?
Hi.
Today we will be talking about Dr. Heidegger's experiment by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And there are many aspects to this story which are very interesting because there are many perspectives one could take on the legitimacy of the topics brought on. One of them is whether the water in the fountain of youth is actually making them live in their youth. I personally believe that the fountain is not making them in their youth because it is so old and it is believed to have an intoxicating quality. So if they all viewed themselves in the mirror while drinking the water and so-called being drunk, then they could not be actually living their youth rather than just a pigment in their imagination.
I think you definitely bring up a good point, and I think it is a possibility that they didn't turn young again and it was all in their imagination. But I think that they actually did, because when Dr. Heidegger brought them the rose and he put it into the fountain, it actually did become restored, and I don't think that would have been possible if it was all part of their mind.
I would have to disagree, but I think it's more than likely that they were not turning young again, because they got to the point where they were so old that it's possible that their minds were so deteriorated and weak that they were afflicted by the fountain of youth water stronger than a normal person would have been. So they were just hallucinating themselves as younger people. And later on in the story, close to the end, they're fighting over the widow, and it says that in the mirror, it's four old people in the mirror rather than four young people. So I think that they're not actually young.
Well, I can see what you're saying, but I believe since that all four of the older characters saw the same vision in the mirror, it had to have been real.
That's an interesting point. What would you do if you were to go back to your freshman selves, because the three characters in the short story all relive their mistakes of chasing after the widow of the one woman. So I was wondering if you would relive your mistakes. My personal opinion.
What a good question.
is I would not personally relive my mistakes, and I would go back and fix those mistakes, because if we were to go back, I would have the wisdom and knowledge from being a freshman with the sophomore knowledge to fix the mistakes I made and go on journeys that I would not have as a freshman. What about you, Ashley?
I definitely agree with your point. I would probably not want to go back and change anything, because the experiences I had last year, I feel like that made me who I am today. And I also was able to learn very important lessons from those experiences. So if I went back and changed it to how I wanted everything to go, I probably wouldn't have learned anything, and I wouldn't be able to reflect back on my decisions.
That's a good point, and I agree, because the things I went through last year prepared me more for anything that could come in the future. So going back and changing what I did might take away those lessons and set me up to be less equipped to handle things that would happen later on in my life, possibly. And also, I feel like I've survived going through last year well enough that I don't think I needed to change anything.
Yeah, I would definitely want to go back, because I would want to change how some friendships and or relationships had turned out. You could say that the choices I made back then would make me who I am today, but without those choices, I could have been a better version of myself today. If the three men went back and fixed their choices, they could have had a better chance with the widow.
Interesting that you say that.
That's a good point. What do you think the story explains about the human psyche and how it functions at a deeper level? Because I personally believe that humans go back to a few qualities that they believe are principles, such as patience, trust, or So I believe that they always go back to what is ingrained in them, and three men in the short story are ingrained to chase after the one woman, and that was their destiny to do so. What about you, Ashley?
I agree with everything you're saying, and to add on to that, I think that when people see something from like an outside perspective, they're always like, "Oh, like I would do this and this instead." But when you're actually in that like moment, or when you're actually experiencing that, you probably would make the same decisions that you would. I think it's just based off like your morals and principles and how you grew up. But what do you think, Henry?
I think that's definitely a valid argument, and that, it's often proposed that humans are creatures of habit, and we don't really like to, change things. And but I do think that it might be more than likely that if you remember what you used to be doing and you were able to actually analyze mistakes that you made, that it's more likely for you to change what you did in hopes that you made it better. One example would be maybe any movies where characters time travel, such as Back to the Future. The characters are obsessed with changing their actions from the past because they saw how poorly those turned out, and they thought that maybe if I do something differently, my family or myself might have a better outcome that isn't as bad as what it is now. Destiny, what do you think?
I believe that the human nature is always going to be the same, and people are bound to repeat their mistakes if they don't try to change them in any sort of way. Like in the story, the men, they all fought over the widow just like as when they were younger, and they didn't try to use like a different method or a different way to try to win her over, and that's why it all resulted in the same way.
So I see what you're saying and how the guys all went back to their old ways, but I also think that they thought that maybe on their second try they had a better chance. So, like I said about how humans go back and they try to change what they might have done or adjust themselves to make themselves have a better position in life. I think that because, they had a second chance to go back, they thought that they were in a better position to win back the widow, because one of them says, "Oh, she promised my hand 50 years ago," or whatever. So I think, it might be just the fact that they all assumed that they were in a better light to get her back, but in reality, maybe not.
Interesting point. There are four characteristics that are being brought on in this short story: health, wealth, power, and beauty. And I personally believe that health is the most powerful one because Dr. Heidegger himself is a doctor, and him being a doctor would promote a healthy lifestyle to him and his patients so that he's not a hypocrite. And if he promotes a healthy lifestyle and he didn't repeat all these mistakes, then he is by far the most important character, and that's why health is the most important. Also, on a personal note, me being vegetarian, I pride myself in living a healthy diet, and I personally believe that health is also the most important quality of the four given. What about you, Ashley?
I think that wealth is the most important. Like not the most important, but I think it's like definitely
really?
the most influential because, like I'm sure you guys have heard of the phrase "money talks." I think people are easily persuaded by money because. I think people are easily persuaded by money, so if they immediately see like a form of payment, then they're like willing to do anything to earn that.
Okay. I can see how you might think that. However, I think that beauty is the highest of all virtues that are shown in the story because, as we can see, one of the main focuses of the story is that, when they all turn young again, they start pursuing the quote-unquote beautiful widow. They're grabbing and touching her. So I think that the fact that they all immediately went back to chasing after this widow really said something about how beauty is the highest of the virtues. I also think you might have heard of a saying or something like that called pretty privilege, which is kind of when, if someone who's extremely attractive or pretty is trying to get something, it's oftentimes that people will grant them that item in easier way than others. So I think, beauty might be more important than wealth or even health. Destiny, how do you feel about that?
Well, I can see where you're coming from, but I believe that power is the most dominant aspect in Mr. Heidegger's experiment. He used the power of manipulation to make the 4 people believe something that was unrealistic. They kept asking for more and more water for this thing that wasn't even real. With having a lot of power, it's much easier to control people and get what you want.
That's a very interesting point.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
I disagree as well.
I disagree as well.
I think wealth is the best.
I think
No, I
health
just-
is the best.
I think power is. It's like if you're powerful, you can get anything, guys.
Yeah, but if you have money, you can do anything. And you
But
can.
power-
Okay,
is
but
better than money.
there are powerful people who were often persuaded in history by others who are.
Yeah, but not everyone
Very
is
beautiful.
persuaded by beauty.
All right, bye.
Bye. Bye.
See you later.